Je suis Zoidberg et c'est la nouvelle critique. Hey, this is pretty good for learning languages. Turns out the Rosetta Stone is quite good for overthrowing tyrants as well. Hello everyone, I'm Zoidberg and welcome to UK Gaming Network. This is the Re-Review, the series where I take a look back at all of the Amiga games that I previously reviewed for both GamesX and Amiga Action magazines. Taking one game at a time, I'll give you a brief insight into the people who made it, have a look at my original verdict, and then replay it. Has my opinion changed in the years since I first wrote about it, or did I call it right? Keep watching and we'll find out together. In this episode, the game that I'm going to be taking a fresh look at is Double Dragon 3 The Rosetta Stone from the Sales Curve, released in early 1992. Although often thought of as a games developer, the Sales Curve were actually a production company for a number of Amiga games between 1988 and 1992. They were founded by former Firebird and Rainbird executive Jane Kavanagh, who remained chairwoman and CEO for an impressive 20 years, right the way through until they were acquired by Square Enix. After releasing their first game, Silkworm, developed by Random Access and published by Virgin, they became primarily known for Amiga versions of popular arcade games. Although what was perhaps their most well-known game, Swiv, was actually an original title inspired by the helicopter and jeep action of Silkworm, and marketed as a follow-up. The Amiga version is also far superior to any version that appeared on consoles, and I won't hear anyone say otherwise. The Sales Curve went on to produce even more games for Virgin Interactive, including the Amiga versions of Ninja Warriors, Gemini Wing and Shinobi. Then, in 1991, they decided to start publishing the games themselves, and adopted the name Storm. The quality of the games published by Storm varied wildly. For every classic like the superb Rodland, we got games like the frankly terrible home conversion of Jaleco's Big Run. Double Dragon 3 was based on the arcade original produced by Technos Japan, and not the similarly titled NES version released in the same year. In this third part, brothers Billy and Jimmy are on a quest to find 3 magical stones, although this quest once again involves punching and kicking your way through an army of rejects from Michael Jackson's Bad video. This time, however, the locations are set all over the globe, rather than in a single city. By the late 1990s, the Sales Curve had officially changed their name to SCI Games, and are probably more well known to console owners for the likes of Conflict Desert Storm and Richard Burns Rally, although PC owners probably know them best as the publisher of Carmageddon. In 2005, they fought off stiff competition and bought out Eidos Interactive, owners of the Tomb Raider franchise. They then officially adopted that company's name as well. This led to them officially becoming part of Square Enix in 2009. Now it's time to take a look back at my original review. My review appeared in issue 34 of GamesX, where for some reason the artist decided to add an S to the end of the game's name. This was the same issue as my Volfeed review that I previously covered in an earlier episode of the Re-Review. In addition to the reviews in this issue, it also featured the first previews of the arcade conversion of Indie Heat, also from the Sales Curve, as well as Core Design's Wolfchild. I awarded Double Dragon 3 4 X's out of 5. Presentation earned 16 out of 20, whereas both gameplay and lastability were scored 15 out of 20. I stated that I had not been looking forward to playing it due to disliking the arcade original, and also because the first Double Dragon had been so poor on the Amiga. Therefore, I was surprised to report that it was a massive improvement on both, thanks to some silky smooth graphics and a good difficulty level. Difficulty has been set just right, and Double Dragon 3 will take an incredible amount of dedication to finally beat, and therefore it will last the average player for a long time. Time to boot up the A500 Mini and see if that's how I still feel about the game today.
A lot of the names credited to the development of this title, the programmer and the graphic artist and everything, they were all also responsible for the Amiga version of Narc, which was published by Ocean Software, and that is credited to developer Random Access, who were the people that made Silkworm and Swiv. but also the Ninja Warriors and Judge Dredd and Saint Dragon and a lot of other Sales Curve titles. So I'm going to assume that this was developed by Random Access as well. They just weren't actually named on the title screen for some reason. Yeah, so Billy and Jimmy have returned. They're now on a mission to retrieve the Rosetta Stones. The major obstacle whenever anyone set about developing a beat 'em up of this kind on the Amiga was the fact that the arcade original would have probably had 2 or 3 buttons on the front of it, whereas the Amiga only has a single fire button. And most developers fail when it comes to converting that to a workable combat system. But for Double Dragon 3, it works quite well. If you stand still and press the fire button, you'll just punch. Push left or right at the same time as holding the fire button, and you'll kick. Diagonally upwards on either direction is a flying kick. If you hold the fire button down, if you just tap the fire button, you'll just jump. And on the whole, it works quite well. So give the programmers their dues there. But the first thing that strikes you about this game is that it doesn't really look like Double Dragon anymore. They've gone for a more gritty and more realistic graphical style, which makes it look a little bit more generic in my eyes. So this tall green-haired fella that I'm controlling here, called Sonny, this is what you get when you purchase extra guys from the shop. Basically, you get to play as somebody other than Billy or Jimmy for a moment. The arcade original did actually include a third brother who could be controlled by a third player. So you had Billy and Jimmy in blue and red, and then you had the third brother, whose name I can't actually remember, who dressed in yellow. That character does not appear in the Amiga version, as far as I'm aware. I mean, this is certainly a lot better than the conversion that the Amiga got of the original Double Dragon, which was pretty appalling, it must be said. Published by Melbourne House, I believe. Fortunately, the developers of that one got to redeem themselves a little bit with their conversion of Double Dragon 2, which was a lot better. But the way this game deals with weapons is another one of the biggest flaws that it has. Weapons are only available through the shop, whereas, as you remember, in the original Double Dragon games, you actually picked them up while playing. And so, as conversions go, this is actually pretty accurate. It's just that the arcade game itself is not particularly great in the first place. As you can see, top of the screen is a timer, but underneath that is where it says how many coins you have. Now, I'm assuming that's how many credits you've put into the machine. But what you would have noticed is that when you actually try to buy stuff in the shop, you're using those coins as well. It's a shame that this is once again an Amiga game that has no music accompanying the action, so you're just left with the sound effects. Music would have livened the game up no end. I think this is probably the one genre that the Amiga never really got a truly great entry in. I'm sure a truly talented developer could have overcome the single button controls and done something great. That is game over. So that's a quick play of Double Dragon 3. It's going to be a difficult game to score because, like I say, I think as arcade conversions go, it's actually pretty accurate. But the problem is that the arcade original itself was not a very good game in the first place. So with that in mind, let's move on to the summary.
It's safe to say that you don't play games on the Amiga if you're looking for a good scrolling brawler. It's probably the one genre where there's no standout example, and consoles offer vastly superior options. Mega Drive got Streets of Rage, SNES got Batman Returns and Final Fight, Wii got games like Double Dragon 3. In my head, I had remembered Double Dragon 3 as being a worse game than it actually is. The developers have done a pretty decent job of making the controls work on a single button joystick. It's a far better game than the Amiga version of the original, but Double Dragon 2 is also far better than this one. That said, the main issues with this game come from the arcade original and not this conversion. The change of graphics to a more grittier style means that it no longer looks like Double Dragon at all. It's a game that quickly gets tedious as there aren't that many fighting moves at your disposal. Being able to pick up the weapons that enemies dropped in the previous games was an important way to spice up the action. You have to use your in-game credits to buy weapons, lives and power-ups in the shop, and this adds a nice element of choice to the game. It only really works in the Amiga version though, as the credits don't cost real-world money like they did in the arcades. Was this one of the first examples of microtransactions? I think it probably was. A score of 4 out of 5 is definitely too high for this game, although it is actually worth playing, unlike the majority of fighting games like this one on the Amiga. Here's how I'd rank them, although as you can see Final Fight is not listed, as that's a game that I'll be covering right here in the coming months. As for a score today, I'd be awarding it no more than 6 out of 10. That's it for this episode of the re-review. I hope you enjoyed it. All previous episodes in this series are available in a playlist over on our channel if you want to catch up on any that you might have missed, and why not give us a like and subscribe while you're at it. All opinions expressed in this video are entirely my own, and if you do disagree with anything that I've said, please let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to know what you have to say. If you want a clue as to what game I'm going to be playing next, then stick around to the end for a little musical clue. You can find me over on Twitter at UKGNZoidberg, where you can find out what's going on at UK Gaming Network and probably a little bit about what games I'm currently playing. Until next time, happy retro gaming. Bye for now.